The house on Willow Street. When the Miller family moved into the old Victorian house on Willow Street, Claire Miller immediately sensed something unusual about the place. It stood tall and grand, abandoned for years, and surrounded by rumors that hinted at its mysterious past. Unlike her parents, who were excited about the historic charm, Claire felt a strange pull the moment they stepped inside. The house had two identical staircases in the grand foyer, spiraling up toward the second floor, their dark oak banisters carved with intricate designs. During the day, the house felt quiet, if a bit eerie, but by nightfall, it became unsettling. The air seemed heavier, and the house groaned as if something within it was stirring. The staircases in particular began to creak, as though footsteps echoed on them when no one was near. At first, Claire dismissed it as the old house settling, but soon she realized the sounds were far too deliberate, too rhythmic. It was as if the staircases were alive, moving in ways she couldn't quite see. Her parents waved off her concerns, brushing them aside as a teenager's overactive imagination, but Claire couldn't shake her growing unease. She began to feel that the staircases were not just old architectural features, but something more, something dangerous. As the nights passed, the creaking noises became more persistent, and Claire's curiosity deepened. One night, unable to sleep, Claire ventured out of her room and into the darkened hallway. The house was silent, except for the faint creaking of the stairs. Standing in the grand foyer, she watched the staircases, half expecting them to shift before her eyes. For a long moment, nothing happened. But then, just as she turned to leave, she saw it. The right staircase seemed to stretch, its steps growing longer and spiraling upward in an impossible way, higher than it had during the day. Frozen in place, Claire knew that something was wrong with this house, and the staircases were at the heart of it. She could feel it in her bones. The house was hiding something. Determined to uncover the truth, Claire decided she would return night after night to watch and wait, certain that the staircases held a secret that only she could uncover. The discovery Claire's fascination with the strange staircases in her new home grew stronger with each passing night. After seeing the right staircase stretch impossibly before her, she knew there was something deeply wrong with the house. Every night, while her parents slept, she snuck down to the grand foyer with a flashlight, determined to understand what was happening. On the fifth night, she made a startling discovery. The left staircase, which always mirrored the right, now seemed shorter, as if it had shrunk. Meanwhile, the right one spiraled higher than ever before, disappearing into the shadows above. Heart pounding, Claire decided to investigate. She started with the left staircase, climbing carefully, but nothing unusual happened. It led her to the second floor, just as it had during the day. Feeling both anxious and excited, she descended and turned her attention to the right staircase. As soon as she stepped onto it, a cold draft washed over her, and the house seemed to grow eerily quiet. She climbed higher, the steps creaking beneath her feet, until she reached the top. But instead of finding the familiar second-floor hallway, Claire stood in front of a dimly lit corridor she had never seen before. The walls were lined with old portraits, their colors faded, the faces of the people staring at her with unsettling intensity. Their eyes seemed to follow her as she walked down the narrow hallway, the silence pressing in on her. At the end of the corridor was a single door, heavy and wooden, with a brass handle that gleamed faintly in the dark. Claire hesitated, unsure if she should open it. She had never seen this door before, and she knew it didn't belong in the layout of the house her family had explored. But her curiosity got the better of her. With a deep breath, she reached for the handle and slowly pushed the door open. Inside was a small, circular room, completely bare except for a single wooden chair and a large, ornate mirror that covered the opposite wall. The mirror's surface shimmered strangely, as though made of liquid rather than glass. As Claire stepped closer, the floor beneath her feet trembled, and the door slammed shut behind her with a deafening bang, trapping her inside. Something was very wrong. The other side, trapped in the small, circular room, Claire's heart raced. She banged on the door, but it wouldn't open. Desperation set in as she turned toward the mirror. The surface shimmered unnaturally, and to her horror, her reflection began to change. The girl in the mirror, her own reflection, smiled eerily and moved without Claire mimicking her. Then the reflection gestured for her to come closer. As if drawn by an invisible force, Claire stepped toward the mirror and hesitantly touched its surface. It rippled like water, and before she could pull away, it sucked her through. The world around her spun, and when she opened her eyes, she found herself in a twisted version of her own home. The grand Victorian house was still recognizable, but it had transformed into a decaying, shadow-filled place. The walls were crumbling, and the air was thick with mist. Everything felt wrong, darker, colder. The familiar creaking of the staircases echoed through the space, but they were no longer symmetrical. They loomed larger, winding endlessly into the shadows above and below. Claire realized with a sinking feeling that she had crossed into another world, one that existed beyond the ordinary. As she wandered through the dark halls, Claire saw movement in the distance. A figure emerged, dressed in an old-fashioned gown. It was a young woman, her face pale and her eyes hollow. She looked like a ghost, lost to time. The woman introduced herself as Evelyn, the last of the family who had lived in the house over a century ago. She explained that the house was built atop an ancient passageway, a doorway between worlds. The staircases were not just architectural features, they were part of the passage, shifting at night to connect the house to this other realm. Evelyn had ventured too far into the mirror world and became trapped, just as Claire now was. She had been searching for a way out for years, but had never found the right path. The staircases were the key, but in this world, they twisted endlessly, some leading deeper into the void and others potentially leading home. The only way to escape, Evelyn warned, was to find the correct staircase. But choose wrong, and they would both be lost forever. Escape Claire stood frozen, absorbing Evelyn's grim words. The staircases in this twisted version of her home were not just stairways, they were pathways between worlds, shifting and distorting with every step. One wrong move, and she could be trapped here forever, just like Evelyn. Time was running out. The dark mist around them thickened, and strange whispers echoed in the distance. They had to act quickly. With Evelyn leading the way, they hurried back to the main hall, where the staircases loomed even larger and more ominous than before. Claire could feel the weight of the house pressing down on her, as if it wanted to keep her there. The air grew colder, and the shadows stretched long across the floor, as if they were alive. Evelyn pointed to the staircases. "We have to choose the right one," she said, her voice shaking. "But they shift constantly. The wrong one will trap you in the void." Claire stared at the spiraling stairs, heart pounding. Both staircases seemed endless, twisting up into the dark unknown. The left staircase, which had shrunk earlier in the real world, seemed to glow faintly, while the right one appeared darker, its steps stretching impossibly high. The whispers grew louder, and Claire could feel her sense of direction slipping away. But something inside her stirred, a memory of the house when she first saw it. The left staircase had always felt strange, drawing her attention. Now, standing in the shadowy hall, she realized why. The left staircase, though it looked different in this distorted realm, still felt familiar, like it was calling her home. "I think it's the left one," Claire whispered, her eyes locked on the faint glow. Evelyn looked uncertain, but there was no time to hesitate. Claire stepped onto the first stair, feeling a rush of icy air as the world around her trembled. The staircase seemed to pulse beneath her feet, but she pushed forward, trusting her instincts. Evelyn followed close behind. As they climbed, the mist swirled around them, the whispers growing louder until they became a deafening roar. Claire kept her eyes fixed ahead, determined not to look back. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the top. Suddenly, everything shifted. The world blurred, and Claire felt herself falling. When she opened her eyes, she was back in the grand foyer of her own home. The cold air, the mist, the dark staircases, all gone. Claire gasped, relief washing over her. The house was quiet, the staircases once again symmetrical and still. Her parents rushed into the room, confused but relieved to see her, completely unaware of the time that had passed. To them, it had been just another ordinary night. But Claire knew better. The staircases had taken her somewhere else, and she had barely escaped. She looked around, expecting to see Evelyn, but the girl was gone. Had she escaped too? Or was she still trapped in the mirror world? Though she was back in the safety of her home, Claire knew